Welcome to the Holy Post. The Democratic Party swept the off-cycle elections this week, but this isn't the first blue wave we've seen in the Trump era. On today's show, Phil, Caitlin, and I discuss what it means and the significance of New York City electing a Muslim Democratic Socialist as mayor. Does Mamdani represent the death of New York and possibly America, as one Baptist leader claims? Then Old Testament scholar Carmen Imes is back to discuss why she hasn't given up on the church and we shouldn't either. Her new book is called Becoming God's Family: Why the Church Still Matters. Also this week, how social media is making Christianity dumber and what to do about it. I've got some good news for Holy Post Plus subscribers. This quarter's book club selection is Carmen Imes' book about the church becoming God's family. If you signed up at the $10 tier or higher, you'll either get a free digital or physical copy of the book and a chance to interact with her on an upcoming live stream. And speaking of Carmen Imes, I'm going to be doing a Holy Post event with her this Saturday night in Los Angeles. So if you'd like to interact with us and others from the Holy Post media team, as well as meet up with other fellow Holy Posters from Southern California, make sure to get your tickets by going to holypost.com/events. And for those of you on the East Coast, don't worry, we're not ignoring you. There's another live event coming up on November 23rd in Arlington, Massachusetts, with Esau McCauley and Amy Peeler. Tickets for that gathering can also be found at holypost.com/events. As much as we love seeing you at these gatherings and taking your questions and getting your feedback and encouragement, we know that the real benefit of these Holy Post events is that they allow you to meet others in your area with a similar outlook. And especially for those of you who feel isolated or disillusioned with your Christian communities right now, these gatherings can be a real boost. And importantly, a place to begin new relationships and find a healthy community of fellow Orthodox pro-neighbor Christians. So we hope you'll join us. Here is episode 695.
Hey there, welcome to the Holy Post podcast. I'm Phil Vischer. I'm here with Caitlin Chess. Hi, Caitlin.
Oh, hi, Phil.
I know. And Sky Chitani. Hi, Sky.
Hi, Phil.
How are you? How is everyone?
I'm exhausted already.
Wow.
I know. We've been talking too long before recording, except that we were recording.
But is going
we're
in
erasing
the
it
trash.
all because of all the things that Caitlin said.
Oh, right. It was
that
me.
cannot
It
go,
was me.
cannot see the light of day. How you doing, Caitlin?
Good. It snowed yesterday and today.
That was fun.
And both days, especially yesterday, it was like the prettiest, softest, walked to church with snow falling down, and it was powdery and pretty. And then it melted, so I didn't have to
do
deal
anything
with
about it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was so nice.
My snow blower is still way back in our little barn. I haven't even gotten it out yet. So I was like, this better not build up and last, or I'm in a mess.
I think it's supposed to be in the 60s later this week.
I know.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my mother told me. And I said, okay, good. I'm leaving the snowblower out there. I do not need it yet.
But just a little dose of snow.
Just
nice.
a little
Let's
dose
see
of snow.
how you feel about this in January or February.
I mean, I know. Okay. But let me enjoy. I'm trying to enjoy it as long as I can.
I think
Go for it.
I think you like snow in the same way that we like powdered sugar. It's just pretty when you sprinkle a little on
But
top
if
of
it's
things.
too much,
Too much is like
yeah, no, that's fair. But I'm trying to keep the joy involved in it.
Yeah. Have you ever had a beignet with way too much powdered
And
sugar
it's
on
like
it?
kind of aggressive.
And then you start to hack.
It's like the cinnamon challenge.
Yeah.
But this is
that's not
actually
good.
great because I want to be contrarian against you two, so that will force me to try and be as like joyful as I can about it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Expect some joy coming your way all winter long. And now the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Sky-filled Caitlin and the Holy Post. Sky-filled Caitlin and the Holy Post.
And sometimes other people. Today's episode is sponsored by Our Place. You're trying to eat healthy, right? Are you trying to cook healthy? I mean, is your cookware part of the problem? Most cookware still contains harmful forever chemicals, where a single scratch on a non-stick coated pan can release 9,000 particles of plastic into your food and into you. Our Place makes high-performance, toxin-free cookware. You can cook without worrying that the coating on your pan is going to end up in you. Plus, the cookware from Our Place is gorgeous. Great design, awesome colors. You've got to check it out. out. Our Place has a 4-piece cookware set that can overhaul your entire kitchen. The set includes 2 multifunction always pans and 2 perfect pots in mini and full sizes that replace a whole stack of cookware, and buying them together saves you $150. So stop cooking with toxic cookware and upgrade to Our Place today. Visit FromOurPlace.com/HOLYPOST and use code HOLYPOST for 10% off site-wide. With a 100-day risk-free trial and free shipping and returns, you can experience this game-changing cookware with 0 risk. The Holy Post is sponsored by Policy Genius. If you've got people relying on you, you should probably have life insurance. You know that, right? But with prices on just about everything going up these days, you might assume life insurance will be more than you can afford, and you're most likely wrong. 72% of Americans overestimate the actual cost of life insurance. Protecting your family doesn't have to cost a bunch if you know how to shop for the right insurance policy. And that's where Policy Genius comes in. They don't sell life insurance. They help you shop for life insurance. They do the hard work of finding the right policy for your needs and your budget. Policy Genius helps you compare options by getting quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. And you'll get a call from a licensed agent to help you work through all the quotes and walk you through the whole process. Really, I tried it and it was really easy. Secure your family's future with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/HOLYPOST to compare life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/HOLYPOST. In the news, we have lots of news. There was a blue wave. There was a blue wave. There was an election. This is the news. We have to talk about what happened in the last week. What happened in the last week was there was an election, and almost every Democratic candidate outperformed what they were supposed to do, won their races. Democrats were somewhat elated. Republicans were a little concerned. Is the tide turning against Trump and Trumpism? Is this the beginning of the end?
Okay, first of all,
Is the fever breaking?
you got to remember that basically every single election over the last 10 years where Trump himself was not on the ticket has been really good for Democrats.
Yep.
So all the midterms, 2018, 2022, and all the off-cycle elections.
And yet they control neither house of Congress.
Exactly. So yes, it was very good for Democrats. I wouldn't read more into it than they should. And actually reading too much into these elections 2022 was a huge blue wave for Democrats. And they thought this was a sign that the country really supported Joe Biden and his administration, which is part of the reason why
he had a mandate.
Right. And it's part of the reason why he chose to run again in 24, which did not end up going well for the Democrats. So I worry in these moments of so-called blue waves that they actually learn the wrong lesson from them.
Okay. But there is a fair amount of talk that, does this mean we should all be democratic socialists, or does this mean we all need to be moderates and tack to the middle? And there's a fair amount of talk that no, it actually means maybe what Ezra Klein said is that we need to appeal to more people in more places and recognize the variety. The lack of heterogeneity of the U.S. Electorate. Did you get all that?
I think I did.
Just said?
I think I did. Yeah. I think if you take any one of these races and look at the candidate who won, the Democrat who won, and extrapolate out too far from that single candidate, what the whole Democratic Party should do nationwide, that would be a mistake. Because they're very, specific to their race, their city or state, and don't over
local politics.
This. Right.
Hopefully, are still local politics, regional politics, and the people are different. People are people, so why can't it
However,
be that you and I should get along so awfully?
It's an 80s reference. It's good. It's a good song.
Yeah. You didn't listen to much music in the 80s, did you?
No, nearly none.
So.
Yeah.
So Fareed Zakaria, he's on CNN, writes for the Washington Post.
I like Fareed.
I do too.
Except for when they tell him he has to smile for a photo.
He hasn't. Yeah.
He doesn't really have a smile, and it looks scary.
He's an Indian, like me.
I'm not making a comment about Indians.
I'm just saying.
I'm not saying Indians can't
He's
smile.
from Mumbai, which is where my family's from.
Look at.
Anyway, he had an interesting insight recently.
Yes.
Basically, every Western democracy has seen over the last 10 years its progressive party get pummeled and its more conservative or nationalist party really rise. So the fact that this is a global phenomenon means that it isn't just about local issues. There's something big that's happening globally, and it probably has a lot to do with globalization and the internet and social media
and immigration
and all these other kind of dynamics that are having an effect everywhere. So you can't just look at even what's happened in Virginia or New Jersey or New York City in this case, or California in these elections and go, okay, well, this tells us something about America. There's deeper things going on, which actually are universal.
Yeah.
So I know I'm talking out both sides of my mouth that you need to be local and pay attention to what's happening in your region. But there are bigger dynamics at work that the Democratic Party also needs to get its finger on, that the Republican Party has actually done a better job at.
So think globally, act locally.
Something like that.
What you're saying?
Yeah.
Do you have a thought about that?
Well, similarly, there were plenty of people, and I don't know all of the statistics on this, but there were plenty of people pointing out that when it comes to the New York mayoral election, there was a similar dynamic that keeps happening in more progressive areas where there's increasingly a divide between white, more highly educated people who are very supportive of progressive candidates and largely non-white, less educated voters, which again speaks to not only the Ezra Klein point of like, pay attention to the different interests that different, because that's not just a local regional thing. That's listen to people when they say what they want, which we could say more about Mamdani in the ways that he did that or didn't do that. But listen to what people want and take seriously that even people who are not as educated as you know something about what they desire for their community. Like that seems to be a dynamic that is particular to local areas, what people say they want. But to Skye's point, the more universal dynamic is it tends to be pretty white, well-educated people that are voting for progressive ideals without thinking necessarily always about some of the implications of certain policies. And it increasingly is less educated, less white communities that are saying, like, you're not listening to what we say we actually want, especially when it comes to social issues. Like when it comes to sexuality, if you are demeaning more conservative social commitments from communities that are in a lower class, less educated, and acting like, well, you're just not enlightened enough to know better. Right. You're not dignifying those people and the beliefs that they hold.
That is so true. Okay, so speaking of the Democratic Socialist in the room.
In this room?
Not in this room, but it's a metaphor. The elephant. It's the elephant in the room, except it's not an elephant in this case. It's is he a social democrat or a democratic socialist?
He's a Democrat.
He's a Democrat who is also
by party.
I know, but he's a member of the American Democratic Socialist group.
Okay.
Yeah. But I learned that's different than the social democrats and democratic socialists are two different things.
Oh. What's the difference?
One's more left, one's more centrist. I forget which is which.
And which one is he?
I think he's the one that's more
Democratic
centrist.
Socialist.
Yeah, the one that's more centrist. Anyway, Zoran Mamdani is the mayor-elect. People have feelings.
They do.
Some people...
We know Caitlin does.
Some people think this is the beginning of a bright new future. Like this is dawn in America, a new generational shift. Other people think, I saw people say this is the beginning of a communist New York City, or this is the beginning of a caliphate in New York City.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
The fact that we have, first of all, he's 34 years old. He's very young.
Yeah.
The fact that you have a Muslim immigrant of color who's a democratic socialist is like, the Republican Party has to be salivating at this because there are so many fear-mongering qualities to this guy that they can use as a poster child for the Democratic Party to scare the rest of the country that... Yeah.
So his program isn't terribly controversial. I mean, some people don't like it, but it's all things that have been done before. You know, raising taxes on high-income earners, which he doesn't have the power to do, which may be an issue. Universal child care. New Mexico just passed universal child care. So that's not that unusual. Rent control. The various towns have had various forms of rent control. So that's not that unusual. Opening a state-owned grocery store, one in each borough. That's other cities have done.
And it'd be a pilot program. You're talking about 5 grocery stores across a city.
So you take any of it separately.
Or the free buses.
Yeah.
Well, free and fast.
And
I think it's high-speed bus service.
which they experimented with a bit during COVID, I think, in certain lines.
Yeah, and people
Right.
have done. There are cities that have free public transportation. I mean, that's not. This isn't the state seizing the means of production,
Right.
and privatizing or seizing all private industry. So, but at the same time, when he gave his acceptance speech, he didn't talk about that very much. He did sound more like, this is a generational transformation, and this is the unseen people. It was very populist.
Yes.
His
We have
acceptance
toppled a
speech.
dynasty.
We've toppled a political dynasty,
Yeah.
and it's all of these little people that now, have a seat at the table. So some people said, well, this is he ran as, Trump populism, but just from the left instead of from the right. So a little more Bernie Sanders, except that he's Muslim, which scares people.
A muzz, as they say now.
Muzz?
Yeah.
Really?
I've never heard that.
Like Riz?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's really
Oh.
interesting. And this is where it gets interesting. Did you see the article from the editorial board of the Washington Post?
Yeah.
I couldn't get access.
Oh, you couldn't get
Ironic. He would give you access.
access?
Mamdani would give you access.
Free
Washington Post for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Not
this
after
is-
this piece, apparently.
Okay, this is the Washington Post. This is not
Fox News.
Fox News.
Yeah.
This is not the New York Post.
Which is now but the Washington Post is now owned by.
It has been for a number of years,
Yeah.
and this is what I'm curious about because just last year he charted a new direction.
It's Jeff Bezos is who we're
Jeff
talking
Bezos,
about. Or
yes.
Amazon.
He made new demands about editorial writing in the Washington Post, and I'm wondering if this and some people quit. Some of their op-ed writers that quit. Anyway. The headline is Zoran Mamdani. Sorry, I'll get it.
It's like Chitani, Mamdani.
Yeah,
You gotta
but
learn the
it's the
song.
two M's.
Yeah.
The two M's,
Mamdani.
and then you got to switch to the N. That's challenging. Mamdani drops the mask. The mayor-elect divides New Yorkers into two groups, the oppressed and their oppressors. That was the subtitle.
That's populism.
That's Marxism, though. I've been told that's Marxism,
yeah.
and that's why I'm a Marxist, because I think some people have been oppressed in America. A new era. Okay, this is the editorial board.
Can't wait for that quote to be taken out of context.
Yeah.
This is the official position of the Washington Post. A new era of class warfare has begun in New York, and no one is more excited than Generalissimo Zoran Mamdani.
Wow.
Across 23 angry minutes laced with identity politics and seething with resentment, Mamdani abandoned his cool disposition, this is talking about the acceptance speech, and made clear that his view of politics isn't about unity. It isn't about letting people build better lives for themselves. It is about identifying class enemies, from landlords who take advantage of tenants to the bosses who exploit workers, and then crushing them. His goal is not to increase wealth, but to dole it out to favored groups. Does that sound like the Washington Post? What's going on here?
It's a different day.
What? And this was a really, this caught my eye and ear and nose, I think, when he said this in his speech. He said, "We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about."
It's not very humble.
Someone pointed out online that if you traded out government for God, that'd be a really great statement. There is no problem too large for God to solve and no concern too small
It is
to take to him.
The sparrow, not a sparrow falls.
So is
apart
he,
from his- yeah.
is he turning government into savior?
Most of us are.
Yeah, that's true on the right and the left.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a little confused because his actual policy proposals are fairly moderate. But
his rhetoric isn't always.
well, universal child care is, most of them aren't going to happen because he won't have the tax revenue.
That's the two questions
do
is
that.
number one, how much of his agenda can he actually get through?
Yeah.
And then after, if it gets through, will it work? And obviously the jury's out on both of those questions.
I think the other thing about him, I mean, you were joking earlier about my response to him. I just feel like if you are just seeing social media about him, which I know a lot of Gen Z, younger millennial people who do not live in New York and are not voting for anyone in New York are watching his social media presence and being like, he's attractive, he's charismatic, and to your point, Phil, the policy.
Wait, he's attractive?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
Just
young.
want you to
he's
clarify that.
charismatic.
He's a good-looking guy.
He's a good-looking guy. He's a good-looking
I will
guy.
go on record saying he's a good-looking
Phil
guy.
agrees.
I think just as important, though, is he's a very happy-looking guy.
Yes.
Oh.
He smiles a lot.
He's very joyful.
He's
That's
a
right.
joyful
He is.
Muslim communist.
And we like seeing politicians who have positive
Yeah.
ideas, who are excited about what they're talking about, who are not just critiquing their opponents, but are excited about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I share some of the concerns, I guess, of the Washington Post op-ed, but the kind of tone characterization of his speech, I don't understand. There are plenty of things I would critique in his speech, but it was not as sinister as they made it out to be. I thought I understood why it was attractive to people. His social media presence, this kind of speech. And to your point, Phil, very clear, constructive policy proposals, whether or not he can actually do any of them and whether or not they work. Like, I think there's a whole other conversation we could have about why it's so attractive to people on the left and the right to have just these very clear, simple policy proposals that then there are cascading questions about their efficacy and their morality that we're not really thinking about. But when you tell someone who is sick of the political world we live in, there's this charismatic, this joyful politician, this young guy who represents diversity in our country, and he's saying, I just want people to be able to ride buses and have food and have childcare. It just seems so, have somewhere to live.
Right.
It just seems so easy to be like, he's great, he's hopeful, I like the things he's standing for. The
and
question,
he focused on affordability, which seems to be
easy to be pro that. Yeah.
the win for politics for
Totally.
the last 6-7 years is talk about affordability.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, also not being in New York, I haven't followed the race super closely. I have seen a lot of the social media stuff. I've seen some of the highlights of the campaigns and stuff. And given all that you just described, Caitlin, and the focus on affordability, Phil, I don't understand why this guy scares the peanuts out of so many people. Like, they are terrified of him.
I think it's partially that he is so effective. It's hard to demonize someone who does just seem joyful and
fine,
positive.
but the things he's proposing aren't that crazy.
Yeah.
No, but well, here's what he really wants.
That's what exactly. They're assuming that behind this affable character who's have modest proposals for affordability, there's actually some deep, dark, sinister agenda.
If you believe that anyone what the term socialist could be applied to in any sense, you can now paint them with the worst excesses of historic socialism and communism. Or if you can apply the word Muslim to someone in any sense, then you can paint them with the worst excesses of Islam. So someone, a right-wing radio host said, when he's mayor, if there's another 9/11, he'll cheer for it.
Which
That's horrifying.
Because Muslims did that and he's a Muslim and we see no distinctions. We see no distinctions.
There are 2 billion Muslims in the world. A tiny fraction of them would be pro-jihadist or certainly pro-jihadist against America.
How do I know you're right? See, that's what everyone is like. I don't believe you. I don't
I
believe
know.
you.
They want their own ideas.
Because on my news feed, what I'm seeing is footage of rioting Muslims in London and in the suburbs of Paris, and Muslims being arrested for rape rings in northern England, and and that's all I see in my news feed. So don't tell me that there are any of the 2 billion Muslims that don't support that. And here's one now, and they're trying to take over America. And Dearborn, Michigan.
This is why I said some Republicans are going to be salivating that this guy won the election because they have a perfect poster child for their fear-mongering. And again, I don't particularly worry about New York City in these issues. We'll see what happens, but I think it's a little overblown. I mean, we can get to some other things that I think are fair to critique him for, but I don't think he's like the Antichrist or some terrible scourge on America.
Well, a mayor can't do that much.
Right.
At the end of
that's my point, is he becomes a symbol, a perfect boogeyman for some Republicans that he can't be elected president because he was born outside the United States, and no one's disagreeing with that.
Now he is explicitly anti-Zionist, which made a lot of New York, particularly conservative Jews, very, very uncomfortable. If you associate support for the modern state of Israel with Judaism,
But he did say
he's concerning.
He believes that the state of Israel has a right to exist.
He did.
He did.
Did he say
Yes.
but not as a Jewish ethnic state?
As a state where everyone should have equal rights.
Yes.
So, and this is the part, okay, anti-Semitism is a significant problem and a growing problem, both here in the US and in many parts of the world. Full stop. This idea that to be critical of the state of Israel or its politics or military actions, or to criticize the state of Israel for only giving full equal citizenship and rights to Jewish citizens, that somehow that in itself is anti-Semitic, it's a little bit like saying accusing FIFA of being a corrupt organization means you hate all soccer players and people who love the game of soccer.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
Like, you can be critical of the state of Israel and not be anti-Semitic. But it seems like a great way of deflecting criticism of Israel to accuse anyone who does criticize Israel of being anti-Semitic.
Yes, I hear you. So what do we learn from this? What does it mean? What is the symbolism of, and is he far right because he's Muslim, or is he far left because he's a democratic socialist?
Oh,
See, we don't know what to be mad about. Is he bringing Sharia law, or is he bringing health care for all?
I think he's
What is
probably
he bringing?
bringing neither. I think probably neither. I do just want to say, back to the Washington Post piece, while I fully agree, a lot of the energy around him, especially the online criticisms of him, especially given that he became the mayor of New York and not a congressman or the president or whatever.
He could be a senator one day.
Sure. I do think a lot of it is Islamophobia, which is more powerful than we recognize very often.
Yep.
The one thing I want to say that I agree with in the Washington Post piece, that to be fair to people who are worried about him, I think is worth noting, is while I do not get any of the kind of like real malevolence that they read in his speech, his is a good description on the left of a dynamic that happens, I think, more often and often with more power behind it on the right, but can exist on both sides of the political spectrum, which is, again, simplistic policy proposals that are supported with a very black and white view of the world, where there are good people and there are bad people, and I'm representing sort of everyone, but pretty explicitly, for him, it's the underdog. That's often how the right describes it too. We just pick different people that we claim are the underdog and different people that we think are the powerful. And so where I would agree with the Washington Post's concern about divide into two groups, the oppressed and their oppressors, is not that he would call some people oppressed. I would fully agree with that. The Bible, I think, would agree with that. What concerns me in the speech, and this is a softer form that happens often on the right now, but it can metastasize, I think, is this idea that it's very clear who is on the side of good and who is on the side of evil. And his point very often in the speech is just like, we are standing for justice and righteousness and truth. The implication being anyone who disagrees with my policy proposals is not for those things, which, going back to them, I largely agree with the spirit of them, if not some of the particulars of them. I've also read a lot of commentators who are really concerned with the rent freeze option for the reason of it stalling more affordable housing being built because it becomes incredibly unprofitable to build it, which I just say to say, it's easy to say, I have very straightforward policy proposals that are good for people, and I am a good person, and you are on the right side of history if you are with me. It's a lot harder to ask, how do those particular policies actually work out and how they affect vulnerable people? How do we find places of common ground where we have very different ideas about how to live together, but we try and figure out the best, pieces of my ideas and pieces of your ideas that can work together? This speech, while I do not think it is as sinister as the Washington Post seems to think it is, does seem to me like pretty emblematic of a serious problem in our politics that crosses the aisle, which is just, I'm the good guy against the bad guy. And trust me, if I have good intentions and I am supporting the right kind of oppressed people, then you can't possibly have an issue with my policy, even though there are really important implementation questions that should be asked.
I think this is a huge point. And it's one, like, I'm thinking back to the Bush administration in the early 2000s and some of his key legislation, like No Child Left Behind, which was a
great example.
A reworking of a lot of education policy in the United States. And there was a sense that everyone, Democrats and Republicans, all wanted to see education improved in America, public education improved in America. Now, there were strong disagreements about the best way to do that.
But who could be against educating children?
Right. Or even all the craziness in those years following 9/11 about should we invade Iraq and what are we doing in Afghanistan? There was a universal agreement that like it's good to protect the homeland and protect the country from terrorism.
Yeah.
Now, there was strong disagreements over what policies and foreign policies were best to do that, and fine. But we've moved into an era of politics where it's no longer about we share a goal but disagree over the best way to achieve it.
Yeah.
It's now I have a goal and everyone who disagrees with my means of achieving it isn't just a well-intentioned but mistaken opponent. They're now evil and should be contemned wholeheartedly. And that we cannot have a functioning democratic republic if everyone views the other side that way.
Totally.
Okay.
Because you can't compromise with that.
Absolutely.
Here's another way to view the election in New York City. This is from the executive director of the Center for Baptist Leadership, which is a conservative group seeking to reform the SBC. He wrote after the election, "It's incredibly important to understand that Mamdani was not actually elected mayor of the historic American city that we know as New York City because that city doesn't exist anymore. Due to intentional mass replacement immigration, New York City..."
Whoa.
Bear with me. This is an important Baptist leader. "New York City is now a third world metropolis wearing the Big Apple as a skin suit.
Ew.
Americans didn't elect Mamdani, foreigners did. And his election is not the beginning of the end for New York City. It's a death certificate. Finally, it's a reminder that everything right now inescapably comes back to immigration. If we don't stop mass migration and accelerate deportations, denaturalization, and remigration, this will happen over and over again until the United States is nothing more than a disparate conglomeration of Mumbai's, Mogadishu's, and Mexico Cities."
Oh my gosh.
And then he attached a chart showing that in 1910, 98% of 98% of New Yorkers were white. And today it's down to 32%.
That's not accurate.
Gracious.
Well, it was people that we didn't consider white at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the thing. This guy he's a historical boob. He does not know anything because in the early 20th century, these exact same criticisms were being made about New York City because tons of Italians.
So the Italians and the Irish.
Were coming in and they were not considered white. And there was this intense fear that America was going to be run over by Catholics and poorer races of
they're not
inferior
capable.
stock. Right.
They're not suited for citizenship.
Exactly, which is why we got the 1924 quota laws passed to stop immigration from these countries. So that we have been through this before. So for him to argue that New York City in the early 20th century was not an immigrant city with a big apple skin is ridiculous.
I pointed out that today, 35% of New York City residents are foreign born. In 1910, it was 40%.
Exactly. There you go.
It was higher. So I asked him on Twitter, and he didn't respond.
Right.
I said, so your issue isn't immigration; it's non-white immigration.
Yeah, it's race.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's not even non-white immigration. There's plenty of all the people who voted in this election in New York, presumably, were citizens of the United States.
Yeah.
And many of them were probably born here in the United States.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
But the fact that they're not white is the point.
So that's how a certain portion of the Christian right is viewing this as the death of America. Because if we can't control, real Americans, white, Christian, can't control elections, then we don't have America anymore. And you see this in the movement to suggest maybe women shouldn't have the right to vote. In fact, some people blamed his election on the 19th Amendment.
Also over 100 years old.
Yeah, but saying 85% of women voted for Mamdani, which is why they shouldn't have been given the right to vote, because it's probably toxic empathy.
You know what's funny is when you lose an election, I suppose you have two options. Yeah. There's many, but let's just narrow it down to two.
Okay, let's oversimplify.
One option is to say, I didn't win, and next time I'm going to try to convince more people, persuade more people that my ideas are the better ideas, or maybe I need to listen to those people more so I can incorporate their ideas and make sure I win next. Mm-hmm. That's one option. The other option is to say, you know why I lost? Because too many people got to vote.
Yeah.
And maybe if I could just get people of color and women or anyone who's a naturalized citizen off the voting rolls, then I can win. That's profoundly un-American.
Yeah, that's horrific.
Yeah. Okay. Thoughts, Caitlin?
Well, to Skye's point, it's not just racism, which it clearly is, but it is also a sense of I'm so right that it must be that the people who disagree with me just don't count. And that is a dynamic that, again, I think it's so much worse when it is like explicit racism like it is on that end versus how it often shows up on the left. I'm not saying they're the same thing, but I think we all have to watch for the temptation to say, I am so certain that what I believe is not only true, but so obviously true that such like any good person seeking the truth would come to this conclusion. And if I so strongly believe that, then when I come up against the fact of losing an election or polls showing that my position is unpopular or whatever it is, if I am too overconfident that like I alone really see rightly and understand this problem correctly, when those things come up, really the only other option I have is to say in some way, shape, or form, whether it's because I think they're not really Americans or because I don't think they're actually compassionate, good people that shouldn't. Either way, I have to say those people don't count because I'm so sure I must be right. The alternative to that posture would be to say, even if I think my opponents are grievously wrong, I assume they are not trying to just be cruel or evil. Like they are seeking after some good, maybe in a very deeply misguided way, maybe in a way that's very shaped by loud, angry, profit-seeking voices in our politics, but they are trying to seek some good. And rather than just drawing the line of who counts in a way that proves that my position is correct, I have to find some way to say, like, what are they saying that speaks to something true? How do I listen to them? Going back to the Ezra Klein piece we talked about last week, this is true for Democrats and Republicans. They have different barriers to actually doing that. But I think most of us in our politics today are not actively and like faithfully, genuinely treating our political opponents or even the people on our side very often as if they are genuine human beings with real interests at stake that might be misguided, that might be misunderstanding the situation. Variety of situations might be true, but they are human beings with fully orbed lives that are trying to figure out how to do the right thing in the community they're in.
It's been said that what Trump was good at was identifying genuine issues, but then he comes up with all the wrong solutions.
Oh, totally.
To the problems.
But he speaks to a desire,
But
and
he
we're
speaks
not
to
good
a
at that
desire.
always.
Yeah, and he speaks to things that we feel like
deeply.
This is my experience. I am struggling to find work, or I'm struggling to put my kids through college, or I'm not sure it's worth it to put my kids through college.
Yeah,
100 different things.
The number one cause of personal bankruptcy in this country is medical bills. Like it's still, despite the Affordable Care Act, it's still a devastating reality for too many families.
Yeah. Okay. Anti-intellectual Christianity's rise in the digital age. This is a piece written by Lauren Knights in The Atlantic. No, this is in Juicy Ecumenism. The different, not The Atlantic. Juicy Ecumenism. Juicy. In Christian circles, a major paradox is emerging. The rise of intellectualism that is, in practice, anti-intellectual. Platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and X are flooded with theological summaries, historical claims, and moral pronouncements that are delivered with confidence, but very little accountability or accuracy. In this digital era, where every meme is a manifesto and every reel a micro-sermon, young believers are reframing Christian witness in ways that bypass traditional church structures. This isn't simply a crisis, it's a new reformation. Interesting thesis. The printing press revolutionized Christian communication. It enabled mass production of Bibles and theological pamphlets, fueling the Protestant Reformation by democratizing access to Scripture and religious ideas. Martin Luther himself praised the printing press as God's highest act of grace for the proclamation of God's word, but in the same vein, condemned it for its unprecedented ability to mangle the truth beyond recognition.
It's like what Homer Simpson said about alcohol.
What did he say?
It was the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Today's social media plays a similar role, with the biggest factor being the algorithm's proclivity to reward speed and engagement over spiritual depth and accuracy. The result is a culture where intellectual posturing often eclipses genuine pursuit of truth. Do we see any truth in this?
Have you been on social media?
Several times.
Yeah.
Several times. I just read a statement off social media from a Baptist leader that one may question its accuracy or theological anything.
Yeah. It's when everyone on the planet has a microphone, this is what you get.
When everyone's special, no one's special.
Exactly.
I remember when I was working in young adult ministry at a church in Dallas, I frequently would have people come in and complain about the fact that their parents were posting things on Facebook that were just like obviously untrue. And they would, theological, political, they would just like complain constantly about how ridiculous it was that their parents couldn't tell, that they didn't just like fact check these things. But then those same people would come to me and show me a TikTok of someone in a collar making a theological claim very confidently and be like, okay, well, what do you have to say to that? That must be true. Our church must be wrong because this person on TikTok said this. And it was like, how do you not see that this is the same exact dynamic? Like you have a different set of things that tell you what is authoritative, but you still don't really fact check things. You still kind of find the algorithm is still the metric through which you determine if something is helpful or true. It is still deeply shaping you, and there is no accountability or education that is credentializing it.
Yeah. Yeah. She goes on to say a 2025 study published in Religions found that social media significantly influences Gen Z's religious identity, often replacing traditional catechesis with fragmented digital experiences. Young believers are increasingly shaped by content that mimics intellectual and spiritual engagement while bypassing its disciplines of study, context, humility, and dialogue. They can quote Augustine without reading him, critique church history without encountering its complexity, and debate doctrine without ever sitting under pastoral instruction. This isn't Christianity, but rather Christian theater.
Oh, I think we've been in Christian theater for quite a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so one question is this new, or has this always been the case, just with less effective transmission?
I think that's a lot of it. I think it's largely always been the case. I think it's far more prevalent than it used to be. But I think what the internet and social media and the algorithms have done is given humanity what it's always desired, just with greater convenience. It's a little bit like junk food.
What have we always desired?
Quick truth that reaffirms what we already want to believe, and a quick kind of feeding our lizard brain, us versus them kind of dynamics. And so just like junk food, like it's an anomaly that we have an obesity and obesity related health problems in the modern world, when most of human history, people were marked by starvation and malnutrition, right? Now, because of consumerism and factory farming and production of food and all the things that we have, we're able to produce so many calories so conveniently.
We're still malnourished.
Right, but we're on the opposite end, right?
Yeah.
So similarly, we are putting out an enormous amount of religious content, theological content, biblical content, but it's this bite-sized stuff that isn't a well-rounded meal. It has no accountability. There's no food pyramid to tell you what you should be eating, not eating. And people are just gorging themselves on junk food, but they don't know it. They think it's good, healthy theology.
If anyone tries to step in and say, no, wait, let me give you the spiritual food pyramid, obviously everyone's radar is going to go up and say, oh, who made you the boss of the bugs? So what do we...
That's, I think, the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, people put a lot of blame at the feet of the Reformation for just kind of making everything personal preference when it comes to theology. But it is still true that for a long time after the Reformation, while there was total splintering of the church and diversity of opinions about lots of things, it was still mostly true that if you lived in a particular area and went to your local church, you still held that pastor in pretty high regard in terms of their ability to help you discern between different things.
Or at least the tradition to which the pastor belonged. You were Methodist or Presbyterian or whatever.
Don't feel any rootedness or loyalty in that now. And you also are not only less likely to listen to that authority figure and take their opinion seriously, but you might be suspicious and think whatever they're saying, the opposite must be true because they are in a position of authority and leadership. So I think part of the challenge is not just the proliferation of all of this stuff and the access to it, which the internet definitely increases. It's the fact that that increase has also contributed to our sense that, like, I don't even need anyone's help to sift through this stuff, or I wouldn't even listen to pushback from, like, at this church when I was like, no, like, not only are we in a tradition that is very different from this person that you are showing me a clip of on TikTok, they actually aren't even, they have a collar on, but they don't even have a theological degree. They don't know what they're talking about. Those people were generally not, I might persuade them eventually, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm in a position of authority in this church, and so you will listen to what I say. That was not going to be true.
So what do we do? What do we do? She says this fragmented Reformation is unfolding almost overnight, driven not by councils or catechesis, but by algorithms and aesthetic appeal. Oh, hey, that Mamdani, he's kind of cute.
Well, I think that is actually the common denominator.
I think
here,
I'm a Muslim now.
is what gives people authority in today's world is their charisma,
Yeah.
especially on
Yeah.
social media. So
Okay. So what do we do?
Get really charismatic.
Excuse me while I get my teeth whitened.
yeah.
So I have more spiritual authority.
I don't think you can wave a magic wand and make that go away, but I think what mitigates against it is incarnate community.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, man, that's
Mhm.
terrible news because nobody wants it.
I think people do want it.
They do.
They don't.
It's just, it asks more of
Right.
them.
They're
Right.
terrified of it.
It's like when you get a really good, well-cooked meal,
Mm.
whether at a
Yeah.
fine
Mm,
restaurant or even
mm.
at home, it's like, wow, this is what good food
Yeah.
tastes like. This is
Mhm.
what really well curated ingredients taste like versus something you got out of a machine,
Okay.
you know? So
but if the stuff we're getting out of a machine really like gives us a dopamine rush
Mhm.
or appeals to our lizard brain, are you sure we'll still prefer the well-cooked meal?
usually the well-cooked meal costs more money.
Yeah.
It requires more sacrifice.
Yeah.
It requires more time.
It's not sold at my local gas station.
That's right. And so I'm not saying the majority of people are going to choose it,
Yeah.
but the ones who do will live a more flourishing
So are we
life.
talking more about a remnant?
Maybe.
I also think, I feel like I've said this many times perhaps on the podcast,
Say
but
it again.
I think part of the challenge is we respond to this dynamic with saying, okay, either we just use the same tools and try and smuggle in a better message. Like we do become
Yeah.
more charismatic.
Right.
And we do care more about
and we do
aesthetics.
and we do TikTok catechesis.
And we, yes, but like better or
Yeah,
right
yeah.
or
Well, isn't that the Bible Project? They're
to a certain
that, but better.
extent.
Yeah, but
it's
they do more
not-
long form stuff.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
not 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's not as slick. And there's more recognition, I think, in the Bible Project and hopefully in what we're doing, that like there's nuance to the position that we are giving in a way that what's most attractive online is zero nuance because that's simple and it's
Yeah.
easy to rally people behind. But I think we think that's the option. Or it's just, well, people aren't going to want this, the remnant, which I think on some level that's probably true. But I think it's also true that when we are putting the focus more on the incarnate community, we're playing the long game on like one-on-one relationship or like a few people in a group. Because while it is true that most people today are probably not going to, even if they join, which is not a huge likelihood, if they join, become a member, officially like obligate themselves to a local church, it still is probably true that they will be suspicious of someone in an official spiritual authority capacity. It's harder to be suspicious of someone who is trying to tell you how to sift through these things, what is true and what is false, when they have deeply invested in your life,
Mhm.
when you have sat across from them at a table, when they have provided things for you, which goes back to something else we've said a lot, which is I actually really want people in official positions of spiritual authority to speak into the theological and the political questions that people are mostly going to TikTok for. But most of our mega church models mean that the person who has that kind of authority is not in real relationship with the people in their church. So we're
Right.
just back to being like, well, hopefully people learn to treat that person as an authority instead
Right.
of saying, well, what if you were at a church small enough that like of maybe one or two pastors, they knew you personally and over time they learned to trust you as an individual. Do I wish we could return to a social setting where we just gave more automatic trust to certain kinds of credentialized and accountable leadership? I do. But I would rather us say, instead of just kind of throwing that goal out the window or going to the most aesthetic, slick thing that we can do, saying like, well, what if we tried to seek after church communities where the people who were in those forms of authority had more one-on-one close relationships with the people they had authority over?
But Caitlin, don't you think, to play devil's advocate for a second, and this gets back to the Mamdani thing, part of the reason he got elected is because those who have been in authority from the established political parties in New York, like, didn't do a great job of caring for average New Yorkers, and they got upset.
Totally.
Similarly, people who have been in structured, ordained, accountable authority in a lot of church institutions didn't do a good job, and in many cases abused that authority, and a bunch of people went, all right, they can't be trusted anymore either. I'll take my chances with the guy on TikTok with the collar.
Totally, which is why I think the alternative being, which has often been true, a still megachurch pastor saying, let's do the slick aesthetic, we'll update our look, we'll have a podcast, we'll do a little seminary in the church. I'm sure that there is some fruitfulness to all of that. What would be better is, you know this, vast majority of pastors are pastoring small churches. They're not even in positions to abuse a lot of authority, let alone actually doing it.
Nah, I wouldn't say that.
Say which part?
If someone's following you, you can
abuse them.
You can abuse
No,
them.
I just mean scale. Like they don't.
Yeah,
they're not.
fine.
They don't have the budget and the staff, and that they're not in a position. They can definitely abuse the authority. That
You can be
they
bad
have.
on a tiny scale.
You totally can.
There's this real mean squirrel in my backyard.
They don't have the scale to do that. But my point in terms of they're not abusing it is the vast majority of pastors are not abusing their power. There are many who are. There are many who, and there is a scale at which they could do it. It could be really egregious or just sort of like you get a big head because people listen to you on Sunday mornings. But many, many pastors are not abusing their authority or don't have the scale of authority that a megachurch pastor does, but feel a lot of pressure because of the church culture we have created to aspire to that kind of preaching. And they're still putting their clips on TikTok, even though 5 people watch them. And there are very few voices saying to them, don't just use the method that people keep saying is the best method to reach Gen Z. There are so many courses you can take online right now to turn your tiny church into like a factory for putting out the podcasts and the TikTok clips. And there are very few people saying, you actually might be able to garner some real authority through relationship that a megachurch pastor cannot, and change some people's lives that they cannot, because you're actually pushing back not just against the content that's coming out, but the whole form and method and packaging that goes with it.
So,
and there's real possibility there.
Small scale analog ministry
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
might be, I mean, I hate to say more effective, because nothing, what the mass market chases is effectiveness. It but it just measures it in numbers, but more meaningful and lasting.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything particularly new about it. Within American evangelicalism, I think we have given authority for multiple generations now based on entertainment and amusement.
Yeah.
And that's just continued into the digital era of social media.
Yeah.
Where we should be giving authority is character, sacrifice, and relationship.
Well, it used to be 100 years ago that your local church was boring, but if you went to a revival meeting,
right.
Yeah.
that was, the music was great, and the revivalist might be like Billy Sunday, was charismatic and funny, and now we want that every Sunday.
Right. But then when it became radio, then it became television, and then it became all the conferences,
and it became TikTok.
And now it's TikTok.
Oh my goodness. We gotta do something about it. Go small church, small, not digital, analog, offline, off the grid, no electricity, no, just
Camping, communes.
An acoustic guitar and communion. That's where we need to go.
Great.
Okay, I solved it. So blue wave, maybe not. Socialist running New York City, we'll see. Us versus them politics, not so good. We don't like that. So let's maybe lean away from that, and let's do church small and offline. Thanks for listening. We care about you guys. Keep going. Keep the faith, and we'll see you next week. Bye. The Holy Post is sponsored by Sundays for Dogs. Hey, this holiday season, the Vischer household has a new dog. His name is Jax, and he's half lab, half pit bull, and he is fun. He's goofier than our old dog, but they share one thing in common. They both love Sunday's premium dog food. While you're eating turkey or carved roast beef this holiday season, are you giving your four-legged friend the same old dry kibble made of who knows what? Sundays is a clean, whole food-based dog food made for the dogs we love, like Jax. Sundays is a clean, whole food-based dog food made for the dogs we love, like Jax. Because Sundays is air-dried, it doesn't require refrigeration or prep. It comes right to our door, so we never run out. And it's healthy food. And Sunday's holiday sale is going on right now. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost and get 50% off your first order. Or you can use the code HOLYPOST50 at checkout. That's 50% off your first order at sundaysfordogs.com/holypost. Don't miss out on Sunday's best sale of the year at sundaysfordogs.com/holypost, or use code HOLYPOST50 at checkout. HOLYPOST is sponsored by World Relief. If I had to guess, I'd say most of you are already pretty well informed about the global displacement crisis. And for those of us who care about what Scripture says about loving our refugee and other immigrant neighbors, you probably recognize this next phrase as something Jesus never said. I was a stranger, and you took away my food and put me in prison. What he actually said is the exact opposite. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. As we approach the Advent season, we remember Emmanuel, God with us, the Savior who came as a stranger, who entered our world, who walked among us and with us. Now we have the chance to do the same. Right now, more than 123 million people have been forced to flee their homes because of war, disaster, and persecution. Together with World Relief, you can walk with them. Your monthly gift to World Relief provides food, clean water, shelter, and the hope of rebuilding, a powerful reminder that God has not forgotten them. It's simple. Start your monthly partnership today at worldrelief.org/holypost. That's worldrelief.org/holypost.
Our guest today is a good friend of the Holy Post. In fact, she's one of our Holy Post pundits. Carmen Joy Imes is Associate Professor of Old Testament at Biola University. She's the author of many books, including Bearing God's Name, Why Sinai Still Matters, and Being God's Image, Why Creation Still Matters. Her latest book in the series is Becoming God's Family, Why the Church Still Matters. You might be thinking, why did an Old Testament scholar write a book about the church? We usually think about the church as a New Testament topic, but there's actually a lot more continuity between the Old and New Testaments than many people think. And Carmen draws that out in all of her books, but especially in this one. And as you'll hear in her conversation with Caitlin, there is a lot of wisdom to be found in the Old Testament for Christians struggling with the church. Here is Caitlin's conversation with Dr. Carmen Imes.
Dr. Carmen Imes, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Caitlin. So good to see you.
Yeah, this is so fun. I'm really excited to talk about your new book. It's going to be fun for lots of reasons. One, I just think lots of cool people are writing books about the church right now. I am writing a book. That's a rude thing for me to have said because I'm about to say I'm writing a book about the church right now. But I just enjoy that so many people are thinking right now about what does it mean to belong to the family of God? What does it mean to participate in the life of the church? But before we get into some of that stuff, let's just talk generally about, so in his foreword, my colleague, Isa McCauley, calls this the third book in a trilogy. You've written two books before, Bearing God's Name and Being God's Image, that have like similar covers and are doing somewhat similar things. Talk to us about this new book. Oh, they look beautiful together. Yes.
They lovely.
Talk to us about how this book, this third one, fits in the larger story of these three books.
Yes. So all three books are biblical theologies of, so I'm tracing a theme through the whole Bible, Old Testament on into the New Testament. So that's true of this one as well. I'm trying to write it in a very accessible way so you don't have to be a scholar to understand. So all three of them are aimed at anyone high school on up. All three of them are trying to show how the whole Bible hangs together and presents a theme. So the first one that I wrote, Bearing God's Name, is about how the church are we are the people who represent God by bearing his name. We've been incorporated into the covenant at Sinai. So the covenant matters and our representation of God matters. The second book, Being God's Image, talks about human identity and vocation. So all humanity is the image of God. The image is not lost. It's our identity. And from that flows our vocation to steward creation. So this third book is really, I think, going back and filling in or accenting something that might be missed. You could miss it in the first two books, and that is we belong to each other. We are doing this together. This is not a solo endeavor. I was realizing that we are such deeply individualistic people in the West, that we think so individualistically that we might miss that our identity and vocation are expressed collectively together. So of the three, I would say people are saying this one is the most pastoral. It's still a trip through scripture, and I'm still looking at Old and New Testament passages, but I also tell a lot of stories about my own relationship with the church, my experience with the church. And I try to address people's deepest fears and hurts and frustrations with the church, their longings along the way.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. And you have entirely met what you just said in terms of accessibility. Looking over the book, which we said before, I read it to endorse it like a year ago, but I looked over it again this morning and I was just struck by how many times you're explaining something that my impulse and many people's impulses who've been in a lot of theological education their whole lives would be to just say, like, oh, of course, this story, or of course, this truth. And you so helpfully pause and describe and give context. And I kept thinking, what a beautiful book this would be for a small group to go through, because a wide range of background and knowledge about these topics could still read this book and get something out of it. You've mentioned this already, but we've done a couple interviews with people who have written books about the church. And I always want to start out with, why a book about the church now? It seems really popular right now for either, it's been popular for a long time for people to say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And they often essentially mean I don't go to church, but I'm a spiritual person. Right. And then increasingly lately, what I hear, especially on the internet in the kind of deconstruction world, is I still love Jesus, but I don't love his church. And I'm not really interested in belonging to a church. Yes. And as you've already mentioned, it's easy without any context for that person's story to just go, okay, well, no, the Bible says you're wrong. The Bible talks about the church. The Bible has a significant place for the community of faith. But it's another thing to go, well, what does it mean to speak to increasingly communities of people who say, maybe in the abstract, I believe the church is good, but my experience has been really bad, or the experiences that I'm consuming in the news seem really bad. Why write a largely positive, like a positive account of the importance and value of the church in that kind of context?
We have lots of headlines telling us what's wrong with the church. And honestly, I'm glad that these stories are making the news. I think it's important for us to look abuse and hypocrisy full in the face. I don't think these things should be swept under the rug. I think it's important for us to hold leaders accountable to what they say they're doing and the values they say they're living by. But I think what can get distorted in the news is the proportion of negative stories to positive stories. And so what I'm trying to do is say, yes, let's look at the hard stuff, but also let's look at all of the beautiful, ordinary things that are happening in thousands of small churches all around the world that will never make the news.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm telling positive stories because I want to restore people's hope. That it's not always the flashy things that make the headlines. It's the quiet behind the scenes, connections between people, intergenerational friendships that really change the world. And make it a better place. And this is what we're principally missing out on when we don't gather. We're missing out on becoming family with other followers of Jesus. And that is, there's no way to put a price tag or a value on that. It's what we were designed for. The Bible doesn't imagine a Christian on their own without being part of a church. So you asked why I wrote this now. And I think for me, it was going through COVID. I was thinking, wow, the whole world is rethinking church all at the same time. What's essential? What can we still do on Zoom or on YouTube? Is it possible to do these things by distance? Do we need embodied face-to-face community? So there was this wonderfully reforming quality of the pandemic that we were forced to re-engage these questions, but also it disconnected us from our routines. And it became much easier not to go back. In some ways, it's the technology that made it easier to not go back, because now every church has got a live stream. So I don't even have to get out of my pajamas on Sunday morning. I could find a church. It doesn't have to be in my area. It could be far away from me that has a preacher that I like, and I can listen to that message from the comfort of my own home. And what I want to say to people is, that might be good enrichment, but it's not all you're meant to be experiencing as part of a church.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's COVID, and then it's the kind of whole plausibility structures around belonging to a community that has mutual obligations and that asks something of you. And it used to be church was one of those things. And you and I would say a much more theologically significant and true version of that community. But it existed alongside lots of other communities that might ask something of you that you might belong to, that might have membership processes. And now the idea that you would ask those things of people can be so, they can just kind of, recoil. It's like this just like, how could someone possibly ask that of me? So talk a little bit, you've said some of this already, but talk a little bit to the person who maybe is going, I don't know, I've just been too hurt. I'm not really interested. Before we get to some of the biblical theology, like right off the bat, I'm like, I'm not interested. Or even the person who's going, you know, I've never really heard the gospel and I'm hearing it for the first time and I don't really think it's necessary. Or I even sort of recoil at not even the abuse part. You may maybe say something to that, but even just to the sense that I not only need to be embodied with people, but that they might ask something of me and I might ask something of them, because that just seems foreign to many of us.
Yeah. So relationships are always include mutual obligations and loyalty. And relationships and true love for other people is what opens us up to being hurt. So yes, church is messy. And yes, church can cause hurt, because when we open ourselves up to become vulnerable with others and to serve and be served by others, that can happen. That's the risk that we're taking.
Yeah.
But without it, we miss out on intimacy of friendship. We miss out on companionship in the different seasons of life. And so there's something that's only available in embodied community that can never be replaced by an AI chatbot or by a YouTube or by a wonderful podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
There may be somebody listening who feels like my spiritual life is kept afloat by listening to the Holy Post.
Totally. Because
these are my people. And I have tried looking for churches and I've gone to church after church and I cannot find my people. And I feel alienated. I don't feel a sense of synergy with the values of the institution. And so I'm just going to be anti-institutional. I'll just keep listening to the Holy Post. And I would say I'm so glad that the Holy Post has been a life raft for you. I think it's been a life raft for a lot of people who have felt a sense of disillusionment with the church. And I don't think the disillusionment is wrong.
Yeah.
I think there are things to be disillusioned by. And I think there's this kind of general discontent that's a good thing, because we shouldn't be content when we're not all that we're meant to be and become together. And so what I'm hoping will happen with this book is that it will infuse this whole situation with hope, that people will be able to lean in collectively and say, okay, let's try again with a different goalpost in mind.
Yes.
And let's actually reform and rethink what we're doing so that we can become the best version of the family that God wants us to become. I think that it can be really hard to find a church where you feel like you belong. It takes time to have those kind of connections. It doesn't happen instantly. Caitlin, you just moved, so you know this personally. Like, you leave behind people that you've done life with, and it's not like instant depth in your new context. And it takes a while and it can feel really disorienting, but it's worth the slog because of the fruit of what happens on the other side. And I think it's also worth adding, we don't need to look for a place full of cookie cutters of ourselves.
Yes.
And this is sometimes the danger, is that we're looking for people who think and dress and act like I do. People who were educated the way I was educated, who handle the Bible the way I handle it, who vote the way I vote. And actually what the New Testament is calling us into is a community that is so diverse that it cuts across all the divisions that society would want to put us in, all the different demographic categories. It cuts across class and race and gender divisions. It brings together rich and poor, slave and free, male and female, Greek and barbarian around the same table to share life together. And if we're sorting ourselves into categories on Sunday morning, then we've missed out on what the New Testament vision actually is for a multicultural family of God that's intergenerational and that thrusts us into relationship with people who don't think the same way that we do.
I love that. I want to come back to the kind of diversity of the family of God in a minute. But what you were just saying about the New Testament reminds me, one thing I'd love for you to talk about is you tell the story of the family of God throughout Scripture. And there is, you kind of come back, it's not totally chronological, but you are really kind of starting from closer to the beginning, coming all the way to the end of the story in Revelation. Talk to us about the decision to do that kind of focus of like the family of God across all of Scripture, rather than what many biblical theologies of the church might do, which is maybe give a little short Old Testament background, but mostly say Pentecost, the church starts, and then here's the story of the church in the New Testament.
Yeah. What I wanted to show, part of the question is, what's even happening at Pentecost?
Yeah.
So you have these people gathered together and the fire falls from heaven and everybody's like, what does this mean? And my book is trying to answer the question, what does this mean? And what we see when we go back to the beginning is again and again, the fire of God's presence falls on the community that's gathered to worship him. And this is what we're missing out on when we're just home alone on a Sunday morning or when we're disconnected from the church and we're not gathered together, is we're missing out on the ways that the Spirit of God uniquely shows up in our gatherings. And I don't think we can understand what the church is and what it's trying to do in the New Testament without tracing this theme of the community of faith all through the Old Testament. God does not enter into relationship with people for the first time in Acts chapter 2. It begins way at the beginning. And so my decision to trace through the Old Testament has many layers, but one layer is just trying to show, like, what did Pentecost even mean? Another layer is to say, we have so many lessons we need to learn about community, how to do it well, and what to avoid. And there's lots of examples of what to avoid in the Old Testament and examples of how to do it well. And I think we miss out on this because our churches tend to preach. You know, I've heard this latest statistic I heard was 80% of sermons are New Testament based. And yet 75% of our Bibles are the Old Testament. And so what are we missing out on when we don't examine these stories, these laws, these encounters with God, and mine them for all that they can show us about who we are and why we're here?
Yeah, I have been beating the drum at my old church in North Carolina about we got to be preaching the Old Testament more. But even now that I'm in a church context where there's a lectionary that we follow and there's an Old Testament and a New Testament, a gospel reading, I was asking Esau Macaulay about it, who's, you know, an Anglican priest. And he said, basically, most of the Anglican churches he's been in, while he's appreciated all the readings, probably something like the statistic you gave, some large majority of the time, the sermon itself is on one of the New Testament readings. It's not on the Old Testament reading. Maybe Old Testament reading gets sort of mentioned, but it's not the kind of main fodder for the sermon. Could you give us, Carmen, an example of a story in the Old Testament that you think, oh, there's something really interesting here about what it means to belong to the family of God that we would miss?
Yeah. The one that popped into my head is the story of King Ahab. So this story drops us right into the thick of politics in the Old Testament. So the kingdom of Israel's been divided into two. There's the northern kingdom that's now called Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And for some reason, King Ahab in the north is wanting to go to war alongside King Jehoshaphat from the south. And they are going to attack or defend themselves against a neighboring nation. And it's a really fascinating story. Let me get it's 1 Kings 22. So in 1 Kings 22, they are gathered together, and Jehoshaphat, who tries to be a faithful follower of Yahweh, is like, okay, let's inquire of Yahweh before we go to battle. We should know if this is his will, that we should go, or if we should refrain. And King Ahab is not really all that interested in seeking Yahweh. In fact, he has put to death most of the prophets of Yahweh during his reign. He and his wife have, and they're very into Baal instead. And so Jehoshaphat kind of tolerates this gathering of the prophets of Baal to pronounce to the king, they give this really generic and unanimous answer, go, for the Lord will give it into the king's hand. It's very interesting because they say Lord, they say Adonai, not Yahweh. And they don't specify which king it's going to be given into. Just a very vague, it's sort of like a fortune cookie, message. Like, this would be true of anyone who opens
you could make it fit.
You could make it fit. And it's so interesting. But Jehoshaphat sees through it and he says, is there no longer a prophet of Yahweh here whom we can inquire of? And Ahab's like, there's this one prophet through whom we can inquire of Yahweh, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good about me, but always bad. And it's like, oh, red flag.
Yeah.
So we've got one prophet of Yahweh. And why is it that he doesn't say anything good about King Ahab? Because he's sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, and he's worshipped idols instead. And so I think what I learned from this story is the danger of surrounding us with people who will tell us just what we want to hear. It's so easy to just block people online who disagree with us instead of engaging in robust conversation. It's so much easier to walk away from a church where people voted differently than you did than actually engage the issues and try to have good conversations about them. And so this story, I think, is a good warning story. King Ahab tries to circumvent God's will because the prophet of Yahweh says, oh, you're going to go to battle and you're going to be shot and killed. And he's like, okay, great. So he goes to battle anyway, takes off his kingly robes and puts on regular clothes, thinking he can sort of subvert God's announcement. And he's killed at random by an arrow. So he's not able to sort of wiggle out of the consequences of his apostasy. And I think we need stories like that to remind us of how dangerous it is to just only listen to the good press about ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, that seems even more heightened in a social media age where you can literally create for yourself an echo chamber. And to your point earlier about the church, one of the real gifts to me about, the church I was in North Carolina, very politically diverse, very theologically diverse. And one of the challenges of that is there are times when you're like, do I have this tense conversation after the service because something came up in the text that relates to something political, or do I not? Or how do I navigate? Yeah. And there's even a temptation within the church to go, well, I'll just go to my small group because my small group is where all the people are like me,
Yeah.
But the gift of that is going, oh, actually, sometimes someone will say something that is in direct contradiction to what I believe, that even if I don't end up agreeing with them, at least forces me to reckon with this opposite perspective that my little echo chamber online will not force me to reckon with. Or one of my favorite things is, even if someone in the church really disagrees with me politically and I still disagree with them and I don't think they're right, I can't treat them like just an abstract idea of badness and stupidity. I have to be like, no, that's Martha who takes care of people in our community and loves her neighbors. And so suddenly it's like, I can't have this caricature in my mind of people. That echo chamber is broken.
Which humanizes the other side.
Yes. And it brings us back to this unity and diversity thing. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about, this comes up throughout the book, right? The sense that there is some exclusivity with the church. There are in and out. But then there is this great diversity. And I think many of us in our churches seek after the wrong kind of unity, right? I'm looking for the church that fits my political preferences. But then also sometimes in the pursuit of that wrong kind of unity, forego a real unity. Or because we want great diversity, we act like no unity is necessary. And we say everyone can come and believe anything. And then we have no resources for dealing with well, actually, what does it mean to belong to this family or not? So talk to us about how do we kind of balance those two realities that seem to be present throughout the story of Scripture?
Yeah. So from the beginning, the family of God is multicultural. And that's something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah.
Just assume Old Testament Israel is all ethnically, Israelite. We would later say Jewish. They're all descendants from Abraham. But what we miss is how many people have married in along the way with God's blessing. So there's a prohibition of intermarriage with the nations for the sole purpose of protecting Israel's worship. God does not want them worshiping other gods. And he knows that if they marry the people from among the nations, they'll be drawn to worship other gods. But there are many people who decide to join the people of God, and they are all in on the worship of Yahweh. Women like Rahab and Ruth and others. And so what we end up with is a very multicultural community that are gathered around the presence of God. And yet the Bible is clear that there's a line. It's not just like any and all diversity is welcome. Like you can do whatever you want, or you can be whoever you want. God is calling his people to holiness. He's calling them to walk in a certain way, to love their neighbor in particular ways. So there are boundaries around behavior, and people who violate those boundaries are cut off from the community. So it's not anything goes. And we see this carry through into the New Testament. Paul's very concerned that everyone gathers around the table and they're on equal footing. There's no hierarchy between those gathered around the table of the Lord. And yet he says to cast out anyone who's false teaching and to not take false teachers into your homes and to correct people who are openly in sin. So it isn't anything goes in the Old Testament or the New Testament.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And even while you're talking, I was thinking, there's ways in which this is such a beautiful story, this combination of unity and diversity. And then as we've already mentioned, there's places where it's like, oh, this causes difficulty. This causes conflict. This is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking, I said earlier, I'm writing a book about the church right now. And I've been very conscious of the fact that while I have experienced hurt in the church, I have also become a very happy, clappy church person, like very just like it, in a certain sense, maybe this is just like gift from God, but like it comes naturally to me to be like, I love the church and I want to be in the church.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about people who really love the church, writing books about the church, and then people kind of going, well, maybe you just are one of those people who like the church and I'm just one of those people that has a hard time. So I'm curious, Carmen, if you could share something that you struggle with when it comes to church. Because I think sometimes people think, oh, if you just love the church and you write a book about loving the church, maybe you're just one of those people. Maybe there are just not things that are hard for you.
There are things that are so hard for me, Caitlin, that I have wrestled with for years.
Yeah.
And it's like, in the book I quote Isa McCauley's, he had a New York Times article where he was talking about how being patriotic does not mean you need to refrain from criticizing America.
Yeah.
So you can be a patriotic American, but because you're patriotic, you love America enough to want America to be better.
Yeah.
And I feel this way about the church. I love the church, and that's why it drives me nuts to see barriers erected that shouldn't be there, to see certain kinds of people who are not welcome or who don't feel welcome, or to see boundaries around who can exercise spiritual gifts given by the Spirit and who can't. And there becomes kind of gatekeepers and hierarchies that I think are really problematic. So in every church that I've been part of, there have been really positive things, and there have been other things that make me go, have we lost the vision for what this is supposed to be?
Yeah.
And because I'm a woman who is trained as a Bible scholar and who loves to teach and preach, that's been the area probably of most tension or rub for me, is finding a place in a conservative church where I can serve by teaching. Yeah. And most of the churches I've been a part of across my lifespan have not allowed women to do all the things. And that's been a hard journey to discern, because I don't think we should just be looking for a complete ideological overlap.
Yes.
And so for quite some time, I've been part of a complementarian church, because there are a lot of things I love about it, and it's our neighborhood church, and we've become knit together with these people. But I also feel weekly the tension of, but why aren't we hearing women's voices in all the ways that I think the Spirit wants us to? So it's something I struggle with a lot, but it never crosses my mind to just throw in the towel altogether on church. That would be like saying, I got a loaf of moldy bread at the grocery store one time, and so I'm just going to never go grocery shopping again. It's like, well, no, I need to eat.
Yeah. Yes.
And so getting one, or having one problem, like let's say there's a grocery store that you just really don't like how the store is organized. You don't stop eating because you disagree with how they organized the grocery store, or because you don't like their logo, or because they don't carry the brand you want. You might pick a different grocery store, but you don't stop grocery shopping. And so for me, church is not optional. It's just a matter of discerning, Lord, where are you asking me to invest?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And along those lines, as we wrap up, I'm imagining someone listening who, as you said before, might be coming in and they might be going, okay, the Holy Post has sort of kept me afloat in terms of feeling like, okay, there is a faithful way to be a Christian, and it actually doesn't just look the way that maybe a church I was in or a family I come from told me it had to look. Yeah. And we have talked about this a lot on the show, where we keep telling people, like, we're not your church. We yes. love the ways that you have been positively shaped by that. That is our desire and our prayer. And also our desire and our prayer is for you to be in a church. Give a word to people who are like, okay, Dr. Imes has like sort of convinced me. Maybe I'm not all the way there. Maybe I'll buy the book and maybe be convinced fully by the book. What do I do now? If I have maybe grown up in the church, I think that's probably most people listening, but I haven't been in a while, or I did a lot of shopping and now I was exhausted by that. What would just your word of encouragement or advice be for them?
I would say think small and think local. There's a lot of people who drive long distances to go to like the biggest, flashiest church.
Yeah.
And I think God is at work in very ordinary ways through small local neighborhood churches who are actually loving your community and your neighborhood. And so I would start local, like, where can you walk to church? Yeah. And how can you invest? It might be small. The preaching might not be wow, or the programs might not be, really impressively varied, but you're going to find faithful followers of Jesus, or people who are trying to be faithful followers of Jesus and trying to love their neighbor, and you can begin to do life together. I don't know that everybody will be able to find a small church close by to plug into, but I think it's worth trying. And I think if there's not major doctrinal disagreements, then this is a good place to start. So think about, what are the non-negotiables? Jesus rose from the dead and is coming again. The Trinity, the Bible is the word of God and it's our authority. Like when the big rocks are in place, then you can hold space for different views on other issues that are more minor.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. My friend, Chris Breslin, who's a pastor in North Carolina near where I was living, he gave Sky and I these hats recently that said, keep church small, local, and weird. And I was like, I love that. Keep church small, local, and weird. That's great.
Yes. Yeah. And I would also say, I'll put in a plug for HOLYPOST events as a place where you can, if there's one in your area, there's one coming up in LA that Sky and I are going to do. If you come to a HOLYPOST event, you might find, meet people and can ask them, hey, where do you go to church?
Yeah.
And that can be a way to help find a place to even try or to get started.
Yeah. One of my favorite things that happened at one of those events, I think it might've been at the first one we ever did, was that we learned that someone had gone back to her childhood church, which she had left. There was a new pastor, and she saw that the new pastor of this church listened to the HOLYPOST. And she was like, okay, maybe I can give this a shot, and ended up back at this church after being gone for a long time. Cool. So, that's so cool. Not that the HOLYPOST is going to fix it all, but just I appreciate, Carmen, a word to say, check really locally and ask some questions, talk to people and figure out where they have found a home. Thank you so much for the gift of this book and for your time today.
Thank you for taking the time to read and endorse it, and for giving this opportunity to talk to people about it. I'm really hopeful that it will help draw people back and that they will find just deep fulfillment and relationship with others in the church.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I hate doing this, but our producer, Mike, is making me tell you to like and subscribe so that you can see more HOLYPOST videos and other people can see them too.